From the Trustmark studios of the Gallo Show, with this reminder from accounts and loans to services and advice, no matter where your business stands in these uncertain times, Trustmark will be here to help you stand strong and keep it moving forward. More now than ever, trustmark.com/business. With us, the Executive Director of the Mississippi Public Employees Retirement System. It is Ray Higgins. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Paul. It's great to be with you. I appreciate you having me on.
It's good to be with you. Perez, I'm getting feedback here, so see if you can take care of that. Well, it's some turbulent times for you to be in that position as executive director. How are we doing as far as PERS is concerned?
Well, I think, we're doing well for the circumstances, certainly. As I often say, PERS is stable and retirees can count on their benefits. We just have to all work together to make sure and keep it that way. You did mention it's certainly interesting times, somewhat exciting, but also challenging in some ways, but certainly thankful for the opportunity to be here. And I think the team has performed well, especially in these uncharted waters.
I don't think there's anything that we're going through that other states are not going through, but the overall health is, how would you describe that as far as the PERS system?
Well, you are correct. What's going on now is not, it's very common across the country with other retirement plans and other systems. So we are much like our peers in that regard. As far as the system right now, our funded ratio is around 61%. That's the comparison of actuarial assets to liabilities. And compared to other states, as you mentioned, that's probably in the middle, maybe a little bit below that, but kind of in the middle of the road there.
Where do we go from here as far as any legislative action to change this in the future? We've tried to make some changes as far as new people coming into the government system. Anything that you would like to see?
Well, it's probably a little premature for me to make any recommendations at this point. You did allude to something. As fiduciaries, as PERS, as a system, as staff, as the board, we are fiduciaries to do things in the best interest of the system and in the membership. And we really just administer the plan as it is designed in law by the legislature. So any changes going forward in the future would require legislative action. From my standpoint, it's too early to make any recommendations, but I think it is part of our duty to constantly manage things and monitor things, also to review different scenarios and options. And I think it's important that we make sure and continue to tell our story and to help lead the pension conversation. So I certainly look forward to working with all the interested stakeholders, to include the legislature and the board and retirees and various other groups as well, to explore and consider ways that we can continue to support, help, and sustain PERS.
Ray, when people hear that 61%, I think a lot of them are a little bit confused. Can you put that in layman's term, exactly what 61% funded means?
The way I'll use it, it's 61%. It's the funded ratio, and that's a very common metric for pension systems. It's one that's used throughout the country and often used to compare other systems. Some have a much higher funded ratio, even though it may be rare. There are a few on the lower end. You have Kentucky and Illinois much lower. We're probably in the middle of the pack, maybe the low to middle end of the pack, but more in the middle range. What it means is it compares the actuarial assets to actuarial liabilities. In other words, of all the projected liabilities now and in the future, we currently have around 61% set aside to pay that. We would love for that to be higher, but we've hovered around 61%, 60 or 61% for the last several years. And an analogy that I'll use is not the best analogy, but let's say that you purchased a $100,000 home and you had $61,000 in the bank and you had to borrow $40,000. Yes, that's $40,000 you have to pay off, but that doesn't mean that you're broke. So, as I said in the beginning, PERS is stable. We just have to all work together to keep it that way.
Well, the number of employees, too, as far as across the state, is about the same. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen in the future with legislatures coming in and making these determinations as far as the budget's concerned, but a lot of unanswered questions out there for the future.
Well, that is true. I will say this, PERS, I think, is so very important to the state of Mississippi. That was one of the first things that I noticed coming in new, and I know that the retirement systems are important in every state, but it seems to be particularly important in Mississippi. We have around 330,000 total membership.
There.
Uh-oh. Are we back?
There we go. Now, yeah, we're back. Go ahead, sir.
Sorry about that. I was just pointing out how important PERS is to the state of Mississippi, and I think it's important in the terms of people as well as the dollars. And from the people perspective, we have a total membership of around 330,000. That represents about 10% of the state's population, and that's direct touch. That's not counting family members and others. And we have to remember the people behind those numbers. That we're talking teachers, first responders. Remember these folks now even more than ever. Law enforcement, firefighters, nurses. So it's very important in terms of people. And in the terms of dollars, there's a large economic impact as well. We pay out about $2.8 billion in retirement benefits throughout the year that goes throughout the state. We send those to all 50 states, D.C., and several other countries, and to many different financial institutions. But 92% of that $2.8 billion stays in the state of Mississippi and ripples throughout the economy and helps support the economy, as well as generate a lot of state and local tax revenue. So very important for the state.
Ray Higgins is the new Executive Director of Mississippi Public Employees Retirement System. Ray, when you look at this too, and I've read many articles on this, it's almost like the perfect storm where you have Wall Street having the problems right now as far as the investments are concerned, and at the very same time you got all those baby boomers going into the system, which, in years to come, we're going to get past that wave. But you put those two things together with a lot of that baby boomer wave going into the retirement system, and it did put a strain on everybody's retirement systems.
Well, you're exactly right. It definitely are several challenges there coming together at once. But together, we'll work through it. We'll stay the course, and we'll continue to work together to keep the benefits coming and to fulfill our obligations. Over the last 20 years or so, to touch on some of that, one being retirees. We do have more retirees. They are living longer, which is a good thing from a health standpoint, but it does affect the retirement system. Over the last 20 years, there have been three large contributing factors to the funded status and the change in that. One of them is what you're talking about, the active to retiree ratio. The number of actives paying in has decreased, whereas the number of retirees has increased. And we also had the investment downturns in the early 2000s, as well as the Great Recession. And then prior to that, in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were some additional benefits funded in the statute without additional funding. And those are the three main factors that have helped contribute to where we are today. Not the only factors, but three main ones that come to mind, and you touched on one of them. As far as the more recent economic events, it's a little bit too early to tell. We certainly have felt the impact, much like many other investors in retirement systems throughout the state. We have felt the impact of recent events, but we're long-term investors focused on the future. So we'll just continue to do that throughout the end of this fiscal year, and hopefully we'll end on a positive note.
A little bit about you, where you were, where you came from.
Sure. I'm a native Georgian, born and raised, and several generations there. Of course, coming from Georgia to Mississippi makes for a pretty easy transition. But I went to Reinhardt College, I went to Georgia Southern University, and then went to Georgia State University for grad school. Of course, always been a Bulldog fan, Georgia Bulldog fan, but I, of course, pull for all the teams in Mississippi as well. After that, I had about that's right. Well, and we're in the SEC too. We're all in the same football family, and all trying to beat Alabama, as I often joke. So after that, had about a 20-year career in Georgia state government. Most of the positions were financial in nature or governmental relations. That included some time as deputy director at the Employees Retirement System of Georgia, and just a great opportunity here in Mississippi. My family and I have come to love our new home state, and really happy to be here, and feel very blessed to have the opportunity to serve as the next executive director.
Well, look, anytime you need us, you have us here. Please call on us. We have the statewide audiences. Everybody's investing in this, as you well know. You said 330,000 people across the state, and everybody's interested. If they want more information, it's a lot of information, and I'm sure they know this, is on the website.
That is correct. Absolutely. Thank you.